Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the This is Revolution podcast. I am your host, Jason Miles. If you are new to the channel, please hit the like, please hit the subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the bell as we are constantly adding new programming to the channel. And if you have the means and you feel so inclined, become a patron. You get access to our special patrons-only champagne room and our once-a-month movie night. And there are different tiers of patronage where you can even get free merch. So do that. We just had a movie night where we watched A Soldier's Story. I forgot how damn good that movie is. And then we all had a group discussion afterwards. I sadly wasn't a part of it because I was having audio issues. Pascal led it. And you guys just want to hear Pascal talk anyway. Speaking of Pascal, let's bring in the superstar now. He is my homie, my dog. He is the man of the Mau Hour. He is the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles.
I apparently frightened everybody by playing music while we're waiting for the intro music to roll. I saw in the chat, they were like, oh, that's so loud. I'm like, this is the guy that's in a metal band. Of course, everything I do is going to be loud.
You'd have think they would have acclimated by now to all this.
You would think. It's all the newbies. I blame the newbies. Also, if you guys are fans of this show, or even if you're new to the channel, we do a special once a month interview for the Real News Network, and our latest interview is up. We interviewed Dr. Joy James, had a very, very illuminating discussion on race and class and the emerging Black bourgeoisie.
It was a great conversation.
I told you it was going to be a good show. I told you that, didn't I?
Yes.
Actually, let's be honest. Pascal convinced me that it was going to be a good show. I'm going to leave it at that. Pascal, thank you. You are a big part of that interview being as good as it was.
Well, numbers are doing good right now already. It's almost over at 1,000 views.
I know. I think this is going to be. Will this do better than Chris Hedges? I don't know. I made the mistake of reading the comments. Yeah, read some of the comments.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Didn't think that many reactionary people were going to read it. The one that said something about long live Clarence Thomas, that's the one that really kind of effed me up.
I might have missed that one. I think I missed that one.
I was like, what? Something about pull your pants up, dirty. It was, don't even worry about it. But I read it for you. How about that? I took that L for you.
Off the meat racks.
Also, Pascal has a great clip that's circulating the internet with him on Ben Dixon talking about the Eric Adams administration. And drum roll, I don't have a drum roll sound effect. Pascal, this Friday, is going to be on the Majority Report talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson and Eric Adams. And what else?
Ketanji Brown Jackson, Eric Adams, current political, what's going, shenanigans, a little bit of Haiti, but definitely mostly about Eric Adams and Ketanji Brown Jackson. If you guys haven't had the opportunity to check the video out, it's in my Twitter timeline, but it was definitely on Ben Dixon's show when I was talking about Eric Adams. It was a 17-minute clip. It was short. A lot of people like that clip because I kind of go through the evolution of the Black political class. The Ketanji Brown Jackson clips are doing very well. People like that one.
Yes. Part 1 and part 2 did well. We know a clip is doing really well.
The slap of testicles.
Let's just do it. Also, I have to admit that's a good rival for it is the trigger warning we did where I played Jungle Fever for you.
That is actually doing well also.
Doing well. It's actually doing well. There's more clips coming. So many clips are coming that I had to clean out my hard drive again. again. Remember I told you the other day, I was like, I had to clean out my hard drive.
Yes.
Edited more clips that are coming. We got some good Kuba clips coming. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Will they allow us to clip your part on Majority Report? That's the $1 million question.
Well, serious talk, folks. Please go check out the Joy James interview. We really had it wasn't even really an interview. It was really a kind of fascinating, candid conversation, to be very honest with you. She really kind of opened up and was just very, very transparent with us about her views on academia, on a variety of things, things that we took off air, but it was a really a kind of period of just conversation. I enjoyed it very much. She's a great guest. I'd love to have her on the show again. And
I'll be doing work with Dr. James, some video essay stuff with her. Pascal and I both will probably be involved in it. Probably the whole gang might have some sort of involvement because it's a lot of work. But I'm excited for that. So thank you for the Real News Network for making that happen for us. Someone said there's no intro for the show. There's an intro video that I made for the show, and here's where YouTube gets real tricky with their effery. I took a clip of a show from the 70s called All in the Family. Did you get a chance to watch the intro?
I watched the clip. Don't tell me they took it down.
They didn't take it down, but they hit me with a we're not going to let you monetize it. And so if I play it on this, then they're going to do the same thing with this. So I appealed it, and let's see what happens. But the irony is the clip that I took was from someone watching a DVD of All in the Family on their screen. And the hit is from Sony.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's never from the actual people that put it up. I tried to put courtesy of on the clip. I guess that didn't work because I didn't realize who the hell owns the rights to All in the Family in 2022. And I was wrong. CBS does not. So that's what happens a lot. And you fight for fair use. We're still waiting to hear back on our appeal. They took down the show Saturday on YouTube, the video version of our show on house music, the history of house music. They also took it down on Facebook, Pascal. Did you know that?
Are you serious?
Yep. As a heart attack. Yep.
Man.
All because there was images for like 4 minutes. They took the whole thing down. So that's another appeal that we have. They have 30 days to respond. So all I ask is that you guys, I don't know, put some pressure on YouTube. Let's call this kind of stuff out. The fair use.
We might need to start putting fair use disclaimers.
Oh, that doesn't stop them. It doesn't stop them.
It's incredible, man.
Extremely frustrating is what it is. Extremely frustrating. Which is why on the intro video, I used a lot more footage that we pay for than taking stuff offline. But the All in the Family clip I thought worked so well for this talk about generations. That whole show is about an old man yelling at a younger man, what he doesn't understand.
Totally.
About what his generation gets wrong, which is what the OK Boomer thing totally reminds me of. It totally reminds me of watching an episode of All in the Family, but in reverse. Would you agree?
I can see that. I think there's a lot to the OK Boomer thing.
Yes, I do too. Well, let's bring in our guests. The left internet has unfortunately become one assembly line in a vast factory of irritation in which the principal production unit is contrarianism. As seen in the above examples, you think you're this, a Trumper, but I'll sell you this MAGA hat. You think I represent this QAnon, but actually I'm this anti-QAnon with QAnon characteristics. We are aiming at this left communitarianism, but really we only achieve this further division. And yet we still ask, why is the left failing? And that quote is from Mike Watson from his book, The Memeing of Mark Fisher. We actually did a show with Mike a few months back. You can find it on the Saturday playlist on YouTube. With the 2019 emergence of OK Boomer, a generational discourse was started at the elder baby boomer generation, viewing the boomers as a monolithic group responsible for the current environmental, societal, and political decay. The boomer tag seemed to be pointed at anyone who was older than the millennials and Gen Zers. This mostly online phenomenon is, of course, devoid of any class analysis. Where does it come from? What is its goal? Is this a practical way to fight capitalism, or is this just another manifestation of capitalist realism? We'll take a deeper look at this with Professor Jason Mueller. Jason C. Mueller is a lecturer in the Department of Sociology at the University of California, Irvine. He researches and writes on a wide range of issues, including global political economy, war, state theory, and cultural analysis. Please welcome Jason Mueller.
Hello, everyone. And can I just say, this stream has the greatest comments going on of any stream I watch. And I'm going to have to just look away from them because I'll never be able to speak coherently to you all if I just keep looking at them. But they're fantastic. And I'm so excited to be talking with you all today. So thank you for having me on.
Well, let's give a brief explanation of how this all happened. We're going to give a lot of excitement to our patrons here because they're going to be like, "Ooh, if it can happen to Jason Mueller, it can happen to me." But Jason Mueller, who was like Professor Mueller, excuse me, is actually a long-term fan and patron of the show, who reached out to us initially to Jason, and Jason approached me because he wanted me to come and basically teach his class at UC Irvine on the piece I wrote for Black Agenda Report, Are Black People the Crash Test Dummies of the Democratic Party? And I thought I was going to go there, like, according to the email exchange, he's like, okay, Pascal, you do like a 15-minute, 20-minute spiel, question and answer. So I was like, okay, let's be quick. This cat had me teaching a 2-hour class with a bunch of kids that had me sweating bullets like I was being investigated by the CIA,
The students in my class, they wanted answers, and you were there to take those questions.
The kids, I know it. I've taught maybe like high school. I've never taught a college class before. These kids were hitting me with questions like in the gut, like, explain this. No, explain this. I was like, oh my God, man. It was incredible. Actually, I really loved the experience because I gotta say, those kids gave me more hope for the future than anything I had experienced probably that year. Very smart. They were engaged, radical as hell in a good way, not in the woke way, but in a very materialist way. And I was like, man, these kids are sharp.
Pascal, I've had 2 students since you spoke to them just a few weeks ago reference the conversation that we had with me over email or in person, specifically dealing with some of the conversations on the role of NGOs in America and the role they play as a buffer or absorbing social agitation and interest. So you definitely struck a nerve with some students, and they really enjoyed you being there. So it was good all around, it sounds like.
No, I really enjoyed it. I'm kind of playing about the complaints, but I didn't expect it to be as I thought I was going to do a short presentation, but it was rigorous. It was it was exciting. I was burnt out after that though, but I was like, how do these guys like Torre and you guys do this like all day at 4 times a week, 4 times, sometimes 2 times a day, 3 times a day?
And they have office hours where kids come and have one-on-one conversations with them.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Office hours tomorrow morning for me. Tomorrow morning. Who knows? Maybe some students will be watching this and come and talk in office hours tomorrow.
That'll be great.
Then we will try not to put any dick jokes in this.
Please don't.
Be a
my
dick
mother,
joke
my,
free.
my mother watches the show. My mother watched the Mau Mau Hour. She called me. She's like, "Oh, I watched your show, the Mau Mau Hour." I was like, "Okay, nice. See, I like the show, but I think you are too hard on the black people. I'm like,
And what did you tell your mom?
what are you talking about, Mom? She's like, you're just too hard on the black people. Why are you so hard on the black people? I was like, whatever, Mom.
Wait till she sees the Joy James interview.
I know.
Jesus Christ. If you thought that was bad, let me really show you something. Well, Professor Mueller, and we have to call you Professor Mueller because much like Highlander, there can be only one Jason. That being said, where does the OK Boomer meme phenomenon come from? Why does it blow up?
Okay, I'll go off now for a little bit, and at any point you want to stop me or whatever, just let me know. So it really blew up. It's not that old of a phenomena. It seems like a million years ago, but because COVID has sort of distorted our time and how we experience time, it was just the closing months of 2019. And all of a sudden, it was a few really important things. One of them was this video that blew up on, I think, TikTok, where there was an older guy, perhaps a baby boomer, going on a long-winded rant about what he called Peter Pan syndrome, which is young people never want to grow up, take responsibility, blah, 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 Peter Pan syndrome. And this was a guy ranting. And then on the sidebar of the TikTok video, which I think was the actual content creator, was a much younger person who, in response to that, held up this big paper that said, "Okay, boomer." Just flip dismissal of it. And that became really popular. And then there were one or two other things. There was that, and then there was what became known as the OK Boomer girl on TikTok and Twitter, which was a young woman wearing a Bernie Sanders campaign t-shirt, dancing around singing a song that came out to tribute OK Boomer. It was called, I think, Okie Dokie Boomer, and that probably has so many views on YouTube. The TikTok dancing boomer girl, the video, if you check, I checked today just to see where I was at. It has over 54 million views with over 248,000 likes and over 26,000 retweets. So it's been big, it's been popular. So that's how it sort of grabbed the mainstream discussion. And as you guys surely know, predating the OK Boomer stuff was the old like millennials have too much avocado toast, can't buy houses type that in fact is certainly why I'm living in a small apartment and cannot have a house right now, is only because I buy too many avocados. They're so great. California has so many avocados, and I splurge, and that's why I'm living in a tiny apartment instead of a house.
My daughter came to Mexico to visit me, and the first thing she asked for was avocado. I'm being totally serious. My 23-year-old daughter wanted avocado toast.
I've never tasted avocado toast in my life. I have an avocado tree in my backyard. I don't want to make avocado toast. But Professor Mueller, can you define boomers for our chat and our audience who keeps asking a question that they probably know the answer to anyway? But
yeah, okay. In order to make sure I give the most specific definition as possible, I will give you the exact years so everybody's on the same page. And I'm bringing it up right now as we speak so I don't mess it up. So, right, a baby boomer would be someone born between 1946 to 1964. That's the approximate age range for it. So when we're talking about boomers, we're talking about people who are sort of near retirement age right now from the workforce.
Basically, the concept of baby boomer is a consequence of the fact that after World War II, there was a massive increase in births, obviously probably because of the incoming or returning soldiers from the war. That was a baby boom, and that generation are considered baby boomers. Would that be correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. So The first question I have, right, is that is the okay boomer phenomenon rooted in a certain material, real world politics that conflicts the digital generation of millennials with who would, I would say, be their parents, depending on age? Is there a materiality to this discourse, riff, beef? And if so, can you elaborate on it?
Well, in an answer that will surely satisfy no one, the answer is yes and no. So, to give it the benefit of the doubt, right? So, realistically speaking, right about now, if you look at you'll find a lot of articles online that'll talk about what's sort of called the great generational wealth transfer that's about to happen right now.
We did a whole show on that with Billy Mintz.
Okay, right. So, people now transferring wealth from the boomers to younger generations, allegedly, right? And it's from what economists and other observers talk about, right? It's supposed to be the biggest transfer of wealth, quote, in history, whatever that means, right? But if you take a look at, of course, the statistics on that, there's class characteristics absolutely within that, right? So there's some good studies by the Federal Reserve, I think from like 2019 or so, and they talk about basically that the overwhelming majority of the wealth being transferred, as people listening to this might guess who are more critically oriented in their social analysis, that there's a small sliver of people within baby boomers who have about, let's say, 40% of the wealth that make up only about, I think, like 2% of the raw number of transfers, but it's a huge glut of the wealth being transferred. So it's a cross-class bourgeoisie transfer of wealth masquerading. Without analyzing those statistics, you might just say, oh yeah, old people have a lot of wealth and younger people don't. And maybe that's going to get evened out now with a transfer of wealth. But of course, there's class characteristics to it that really don't get discussed unless you go looking for the statistics yourself, or if you're so inclined to do an economic analysis versus a generation analysis. Mm-hmm. In terms of there being some reality to, say, the cultural component of people using the term, I would say that there's something that was picked up on, I think, so when this sort of first became popular, Bhaskar Sankara from Jacobin wrote a pretty popular essay in The Guardian about the boomer phenomena. And he was quite dismissive of it and said, this is just an ultra online middle class phenomena, and it's lacking a class analysis, which is correct, right? Using the sort of dismissing boomers as the enemy is sort of a superficial, non-class based analysis. But, some of the stuff that I wrote on it tries to take it a step further from the class analysis to talk about culture and take the cultural component serious in its own right.
How much do you think the okay boomer discourse is rooted in the generational fracture that occurs and is still occurring in the Democratic Party around who supported Hillary and who supported Bernie?
Well, that's hard to say because the okay boomer girl got real popular with a Bernie Sanders t-shirt on. But however, how representative that is of the Bernie versus
Donald Trump or Joe Biden,
or that was, yeah. Well, I guess Hillary predates that video, but the larger sentiment. I don't especially think people using the phrase online or in real life, as many people have probably heard it in real life, not just online. I don't necessarily think there's that clear of a analysis, and I think it's sort of ironically or cynically gets used as a toss-off phrase that functions as this sort of fetishist disavowal, right? Like, you don't have to take a political class analysis seriously. The world has a disaster, grave climate catastrophe on the horizon, class exploitation at unprecedented levels. But rather than taking the time to seriously analyze it, even in like a normie social democrat Bernie Sanders way, you sort of just like, oh, haha, it's it's the boomers. And then if you challenge someone who says that, they might be like, oh, I know it's really not boomers. I know actually it's more nuanced than that. But then it's like, okay, well, then why is the joke so potent in the first place? Like, there is a larger question to be asked, because the year that this became popular, which was just the end of 2019, it ended up being, what is a boomer? And right, this term of baby boomer has been around for forever as a generational term. The Google search, what is a boomer, was the fourth most search of all of 2019 in the United States on Google. So it obviously struck a chord more than like the million other memes and jokes that circulate on social media every day. There's something specific to this that somehow drew people in. And despite cynically saying, oh, I don't actually believe in it, but I'm going to say it anyway and blame boomers, there's something more to the picture, I think, which deals with the lack of planning for a future that's not a disaster for people that are young and older.
Well, let me ask you this question. Why the boomer generation, not Generation X? Does it just not have the same ring to it?
Well, isn't Generation X largely just ignored in most political analysis anyway? They're sort of the forgotten generation in discussions. Maybe I'm wrong. Just maybe I've missed it.
I think the boomer generation is still holding on to a certain amount of power in federal positions, right? But if you think about a lot of the mayors and police chiefs and district attorneys, they're all coming out of Generation X. Governors, not all, but a lot of the ones, especially the ones making a lot of the most noise. And this is bipartisan.
Supreme Court nominees.
It's something. What's the vice president's name? Can't think of her name.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah, isn't she a Gen Xer?
She's like 3 years old. That's a very good question. What year was Kamala Harris born?
She's on the verge. She's like on the cusp. Like I'm a cusp.
Is like 3 or 4 years older than I am.
There's a lot to be said about the apolitical nature of the Generation X, because most of us are growing up in an era that is very, anti-politic. But that being said, I do think, I've written about it, not like you, Mr. Smart Guy, Jason, but I definitely have written and done some video essays, and a lot of my work actually is on that era, because I do think there is something to be said politically of this quote unquote anti-politics.
I disagree with some of our more, dedicated Marxoid comrades and friends who are like, oh, generational analysis is poo-poo. I don't think it's poo-poo at all. I think that your time in terms of when you live in a space and time and what you intake in terms of literature, media, consumption, music, art, political realities shapes your worldview. And it's not accidental to me why Generation X has the politics that it is. I am Generation X, right? Mm-hmm. I was born in the late 60s. I know why Generation X is more apolitical. I know why Generation X is very cynical. And I know why Generation X really doesn't have a significant political character. It's because if you look at Generation X, and what people don't really realize is that baby boomers have all this wealth, and they say millennials have no wealth, but no one ever asks what's the situation of Generation X, because a lot of people don't know, because they weren't old enough to know, that Generation X had the same pejoratives that are said about millennials now in the 90s. Get out of your parents' house. Get a job.
Did you ever watch Mr. Show, Jason? David Cross, Bob Odenkirk? There's a Mr. Show sketch from the 90s that actually speaks to everything Pascal is talking about. Another thing people don't talk about with Generation X that is a huge demarcating line is that there was a lot of wealth creation through the private sector. So unlike the previous generation that comes up through government largesse, you're talking about people growing up in a generation of a lot of deregulation. So from the late 70s, at the end of the Carter administration, we start to see some financial deregulation, and then it really ramps up with Reagan, and then Clinton kind of doubles down on that by erasing Glass-Steagall by the end of his 2-term presidency. A lot of that deregulation that happened, a lot of wealth was grown, especially in like the Black community, with the ability to buy homes. Now, of course, we know all that was lost, or a lot of it was lost. I won't say all of it was lost in 2008. But I mean, I do think there's a reason for a lot of the apolitical nature of that time frame.
And a lot of people fail to realize, there's tons of Generation X people that are still burdened down with student loan debt.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I think some of the issues like student loans do bolster some of the arguments that I think I sort of agree with that Pascal is saying, which is like there are certain features that just based on the structure of the political economy, of the shift of the American political economy, do disproportionately burden people born or impacted at certain times in history. But I guess what I'm trying to figure out then and think through is, right, I agree with a lot of the arguments on like the movement of anti-politics and post-politics, like the stuff from the BungaCast book, which I know you guys have talked about. And they touch upon that generation wars really briefly in their book too. And I think that's a pretty solid book that they wrote. But right, the question I think we should be trying to figure out is like, the switch from like the 1990s anarchist flavored politics, anti-state, all that stuff, that's pretty well documented. But what we have to figure out is why is there still no real political momentum 30 years later for anyone that's grown up since the Gen X were younger, getting politically active? I mean, sure, there are big like showing up to a protest event numbers, but that doesn't mean anything in material change in any real way, nor does it mean people have a coherent ideology whatsoever, which is what I'm trying to get at. And when you don't have a coherent political ideology or some form of a class discussion, then you probably fall back on generation wars discourse or something like that.
Right. No, I mean, of course, as dialectical materialists, we always understand that we look at things within the frame of class. But as our good friend Derek Vaughan always says, age is a material reality. There is materiality to your age in terms of the actual consequence and how it affects your life, in terms of things you can or cannot do and what you see and what you view. And one of the things that I really find fascinating about this kind of generational perspective is that I noticed, right, as someone who was a Gen Xer, I was on social media earlier than many of my peers. A lot of people who were from my age cohort really didn't start getting into social media till like 2010, like a couple of years into the Obama presidency. Because I was writing online, I started doing blogging, I started writing for Black Agenda Report and other publications. I basically was the guy who used to show my friends how to use social media, how to get on Facebook, how to use Twitter, how to use this, how to use LinkedIn. And what I noticed is that one of the bigger distinctions between Generation X and millennials is that millennials already had an advantage when it came to social media, and which is clear. And that people who are from our generation, Generation X, they weren't as willing to be as transparent about their opinions on social media as you would see with millennials. And as a result, you would see the discourse start to get framed and targeted to younger and younger people. And basically everyone who was above millennials just felt like they were just reacting to what millennials were saying, to the point where they would literally ask for translators of like, well, what does that mean? Like, what's going on, right? And at a certain point, what you find is that there's like a fracture in social media. At a certain point, Facebook becomes not only the platform of Generation X, it becomes the platform of boomers. Twitter is still kind of mixed in terms of generationally. Then you have Instagram, which is like now the platform of definite millennials. And then you have TikTok, which is like even younger. So, all of Generation Z is probably more on TikTok. So you're finding now that social media platforms dictate people's generational usage. But the main thing I was going to say is that one of the main things I noticed is that the millennials, I've seen articles like this, particularly amongst Black millennials, with all of these what I call the fetish of movements, Black Lives Matter, ADOS, we need a movement. This is a direct product of a generation of Black kids who really believed they wanted to replicate their own civil rights movement. There literally are articles I can show you where, when the Black Lives Matter kicked off, some of these kids were saying, we have our own movement now, simply because they wanted to have something that they could say they contributed to, like their either parents or grandparents, like the civil rights movement. I thought that was so absurdly ridiculous.
Well, look, let's actually put that into some sort of context, though. Every moment that's that big of a historical moment, Woodstock, the Vietnam War and the protests, the Black Panther Party, every generation wants to have that moment, right? They want to be a part of that thing. Nobody wants to sit around, like Jason kind of jokingly said, like, well, isn't that a generation that didn't really do shit? Like, who wants to say, like, we didn't have a fucking war protest?
Oh, wait, hold on. I want to say I was not accusing your generation of not doing anything. Let me clarify.
You make Jason too.
What I was saying is, in larger political discussions, doesn't your generation tend to get left out a lot? I don't.
I'm messing with you. Well, but I mean, you know what I'm saying. So, like, even from and you guys are gonna be like, oh, we don't give a shit. But even from like the musical standpoint of festivals, everyone wants to be Woodstock. Everyone wants to be Woodstock. Every music festival I've ever been at, and I've been at most of them, they all want to be Woodstock, because that is a generational moment that even a young person that wasn't born in even 99 to remember the debacle of the 99 knows what Woodstock is. Everyone knows what the Black Panthers are. So of course someone's going to be like, we have Black Lives Matter. This is our Black Panther Party. And look, we can do it from the comfort of our own home by clicking something. I mean, who doesn't love that? That's the wonder of capitalism. That's the wonder of the win-win of the digital economy. Like, that's the one thing that that I did enjoy a little bit in Watson's book and Alphabunga. I don't remember if they really talk about it in their book, but it is the difference of the Generation X cats as a whole don't like being marketed to. And the younger generation is totally okay with being marketed to.
The Generation X cats like to be what they call the tastemakers, because why? We are the generation of massive pop culture. We are the hip hop generation. Like, literally, and I've said this a million times on this show, I remember where people my generation, who actually consider themselves serious journalists, I did not, who wrote for hip hop publications, would say things like, hip hop is our contribution to the revolution of the Black liberation movement. I thought that shit was asinine. I thought that shit was asinine when they said it then, and I think it's more asinine now.
You're gonna tell me when you see Black people liberating and X-Clan is in the background, you don't get excited?
No, come on, man. Bro, listen. I grew up listening to hip hop. I like some of it. A lot of it I don't. I don't have a fetish obsession with it. Bro, listen, man, Jason, you older, you look at old Vibe magazine, Source magazine articles written by people who I don't want to mention their names because I know both of us can't stand them. But these folk were literally trying to make hip hop seem like it was a political movement. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. It was comedy. You know what I'm saying? It was absolutely absurd. And it really demonstrates how totally demobilized Black politics had become. We talked the other day about the New York City black bohemian nonsense. These Negroes thinking in 1989 under Ronald Reagan, then the Harlem Renaissance reborn. Get out of here with that stupidity, man. Shout out to Cedric Johnson for sending me an article, by the way, on Spike Lee being the granddaddy of gentrification in Brooklyn, that he's always crying about being gentrified.
If Jason too was on some of those texts, he'd have material for days. I mean, Jason, would you agree though that some of the things we see it's the same thing, it's just different. It's just a different packaging. Tony Robbins has now given way to the internet Instagram influencer.
Yes, you guys brought up a lot of interesting and fun points. One thing that came to mind adjacent to what you were saying was, it made me think, actually, so this past academic quarter that just ended a few weeks ago for me teaching here, I taught a full seminar on the history of the U.S. war on terrorism and what that meant for the U.S.'s global hegemonic aspirations for the last 20 years. And it dawned on me right before I started teaching it that the average undergraduate is approximately 20 years old. So their entire life, their government has been waging global war. And one thing that was really interesting to me as a generational notification to me was that despite living their entire lives in their government waging a global war, not a single student had even the most elementary knowledge of the excuses Bush gave to invade Iraq, what the U.S. was doing in Afghanistan for 20 years before they pulled out and it made headlines briefly a few months ago, what the U.S. is doing in Somalia, across Northeast Africa, across the Arabian Peninsula, none of it. Through their own admission, because I sort of pulled them to start class. And I was like, okay, let's see what page we're on here. What background knowledge do you have coming into class? And that, to me, maybe gave a little bit of credence to some of the lived experience of generations playing out in people's life for political activism. Because teaching a course that you grew up through the whole war, but there being no knowledge on it. I mean, if you were to think back to say the Vietnam War era, right? Students were damn well aware of what was going on in Vietnam, at least many of them were. But the knowledge of, as soon as Bush transitioned to Obama, the knowledge of war on terror disappeared. So when I was an undergrad, right as the hype around Obama was reaching a fever pitch, I couldn't get anyone interested to go to anti-war protests because Obama was leading the drone wars and Bush was bad, but Obama was good. And then any discussion about, hey, we should still be against the war on terror, even if Obama's in office now. Nobody would give me the time of day on a, quote, liberal college campus in New York. Nothing. But anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked on that, but it was something I thought of about the way that generations play out for our political consciousness and whether that's the same or different in other generations, because we're still living through this war right now. Mm-hmm. And the cultural discussion of it, right? Other than when when Biden decided to withdraw troops a couple months ago, that was the first time in years I saw any serious discussion on the news about the war on terrorism. I mean, do you guys have any knowledge at all of that ever being covered the last few years, other than that one drop in the bucket?
Obama killed the anti-war movement, man.
No, I no. There was no anti-war movement to kill.
Now, during the Bush presidency, Code Pink was much more active. There was much more of a pushback against the goal. I can't say I'm giving him too much credit. Obama didn't kill the anti-war movement. What happened is that people being sucked into Obamaism, because don't forget, one of the things that gets Obama elected is I don't believe in the Afghanistan war, because that's not what he said about I don't believe in all war, just the ones that are not dumb or something. In other words, he was presented as some kind of anti-Iraq war candidate, which, in other words, the closest you're going to get to a mainstream not anti-war candidate, which was a charade, obviously, because we know how much blood he spilled in the Muslim world. I think, and I know, a lot of people got really open buy that. I just don't agree with dumb wars or something to that effect. And he comes into the White House. Dude, I remember people would fight you for keeping count of how many people were killed with drones in his first term.
Well, what Jason is speaking to is I had a friend, a white gentleman, that brought up some of Obama's crimes in a class during his second term in office, and he was looked at as a bit of a racist. Because there was a lot of white people that didn't like Obama because he was black.
Yo, you know what I can ask you? You know what we could pull up right now? Right now?
The clip that Doug played from The Onion, that was hilarious.
A 2012 article
Mhm.
by Melissa Harris Perry. Remember her, guys?
Yeah.
Who said that if you are white and you don't support Obama's reelection, but you supported Clinton, you are a racist in the nation.
I mean, I think that's a real thing. I wouldn't say Obama by himself or his presidency killed the anti-war movement, because there's something that we talk about on this show, and again, Jason brought it up. There was no left during the Bush years. The conversations that we have now about socialism and dead. Were you in school during that time, Jason?
I was in my undergraduate right before Obama was elected. I started college,
And there was no talk of.
There was no. You're right. There was no materialist Marxist. There was no anti-capitalist left.
So it wasn't even really anti-capitalist. It was more, and Alpha Bung, I really think, hits the nail on the head of this. It was much more cultural, right? Like TV's the bad guy. We're gonna talk.
Yeah, you guys might remember before Bush invaded Iraq, and maybe up until the recent Black Lives Matter protests, the largest recorded global protest event in history was protesting Bush's invasion of Iraq, like a coordinated, at least one day, if not multi-day campaign. It's like you can find like the Wikipedia page of it. There was like the largest coordinated protest in history. Mm-hmm. But even with that being said, there's nothing, right? What happened? Bush went ahead and invaded Iraq. Absolutely nothing. Like, so the steam behind the quote anti-war movement of the time, was it was impotent, and I don't know. I don't want to throw stones, as I was very young at the time, but maybe just
this kind of goes back. This goes to a friend of the show, Daniel Bessner's position that I disagree with about the death of mass politics, right? And the main reason I disagree with Bessner is that not that I think he's wrong per se in terms of the left or liberals. I disagree with the death of mass politics argument, because mass politics is working for the right. And it's worked for the right. So, I mean, I would argue that in terms of the
to me to kill that, all you have to say is, well, explain West Virginia. Explain the teacher strike in West Virginia.
Right.
That's an entire state that had a mostly wildcat strike. A lot of his research data didn't include wildcat strikes. So if you're just going off strikes within actual unions, that number is going to be down. But to your point, there's a lot of politics going on the right, and there is some movement. It's just we don't talk about it much, and we don't look at it as mass movements, because a lot of people are kind of stuck online. Let's just be honest. There's the real world, and there's the internet. I do believe that.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
There's a lot of interest. So like, I don't want to give any misperception of like that I was at all anyway putting down my students, because I want to say that their intellectual curiosity about learning what like the war on terrorism is and stuff was astounding. And by the end of the quarter, the conversations were fantastic. But I think the point I want to make sure I made clear is that like the entry level knowledge, had they not stepped into the classroom to talk about it for an ongoing 20-year war, was next to nil. It's just about nothing. And that, if you're talking generations, there has to be, right, probably some intergenerational blame going on, where if 20-year-olds now have inherited zero knowledge of what the heck has been going on for 20 years, there's a much larger conversation to be had about why no one knows what the heck the US government is doing in dozens of countries around the world. Whereas, again, even elementary knowledge during the Vietnam War, students knew what was going on in Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. I mean, at least many of them did, right? But anyway,
It's less resources.
Yeah, I want to be clear that I really appreciated all of my students. I don't want there to be any confusion that I was in any way talking down to them at all.
Too bad, too late. Jason, rate your professor is not going to look good for you right now.
Well, I had a question I wanted to ask you, Professor Mueller. Do you think there's a possibility that some of this okay boomer sentiment is really rooted in just simple basic jealousy?
Well, I mean, jealousy would require the large number of people using the phrase to know what material resources boomers have that they're jealous of. So that expects people to be looking into the material realities of how certain demographics of boomers or segments of the class live versus Generation Z or millennials. So maybe, but even something as simple as that, like, assumes that there is a degree of knowledge of what they're lacking versus it just sort of being like, I guess on an elementary level, it's, yeah, I'm mad that I can't have comfort and that job security seems to be less now than get a job out of high school, don't even need a college degree, work, buy a house, all of that old working class narrative of America from decades ago. But it does require some like background knowledge of knowing what you're missing out on in order to be jealous, and what degree of the many ultra online young Zoomer leftists investigate that is to be determined. I can't personally tell myself, based on my interactions with younger people, how knowledgeable they are about material reality for people in the United States.
Someone said something interesting. Steve in the chat says he thinks that the Zoomer generation is going to be hardcore libertarians. I don't think he's wrong about that, because between the advent of cryptocurrency, social media hustling, OnlyFans, Instagram, marketing, your image, your persona, becoming a influencer, finding ways to hustle money outside of this normally just working a 9 to 5. I very much would not be surprised if like the Zoomers become like ridiculously pro-capitalist, like libertarian types who hate all government. They hate Trump, they hate Biden, they hate all of it, and they're just like, just give me money. What do you teach Zoomers? So what do you think?
Isn't that the libertarian mindset though? The government's getting in the way of all your money.
So I've noticed over about the last 10 years that about 10 years ago, the concept of investing in crypto, talking about Bitcoin, this was a joke. Like, no serious person who thought of themselves on the left was doing it. It was something to be laughed at and dismissed. Like, Bitcoin, get out of here. We're talking about serious politics. Come on. But now, some of my friends and younger people than me are telling me about all of these wonderful opportunities for investment here and there. So I think you might be onto something, Pascal. And if I were to ask even younger students, I think that you are definitely barking up the correct analysis there, that get rich quick, leave me alone. And I know my life chances might sort of stink, but maybe I'll make it rich on Dogecoin or Bitcoin or whatever, like might work out for them.
But that was my kind of my point. I mean, when you look at, if you think of I kind of posit things by years when I write about stuff. And if you look at 94 being kind of an important year for Generation X, and then the young people born after, the millennials, the death of Cobain, you really start to bring in the idea of just commodifying a quote unquote movement. Like, punk rock music was really hard for people to commodify. You can even say the same thing about like heavy metal. Rap was made for marketing. When you think about grunge, just the name is invented not by the people making it, but by Madison Avenue. So you've kind of created an entire mystique of importance around the music that you were afraid of just 10 years earlier. And then you go so far as to say, well, let's call it pop punk and make it even sillier. And we're really going to double down on selling the aesthetics. So you have multiple generations of people that are really, really okay with being marketed to. And where we had characters like Tony Robbins, these motivational speakers, and maybe even millennials to a certain degree might have had like The Secret. Instagram influencers are a fascinating phenomenon to me because as we see people like Elizabeth Holmes and even with WeWork, we know they're selling snake oil. It's not like these people are geniuses and they're showing you some crazy charts. They're just saying the words you want to hear. There's such a need to want to get rich quick. There's a lot to what Pascal is saying about this libertarian bend to a lot of people coming up, because the come up can be quick. I mean, the OK Boomer girl, from what I read in your writing, had a quick come up off that one song. The Cash Me Outside on the Dr. Phil show young lady turned into a rapper overnight. Never rapped before. Was made a fool of on a talk show and turned it into a record contract. So there is something to be said about that. Pascal, you just going to sit there and look angry, or you want to?
No, man. No, I agree. Man, I think it's a very complex mixture of things. I mean, some people in the chat are talking about, Zoomers are statistically more inclined to socialism than even the prior two generations, millennials. I said, yeah, that's today. We don't know what that's going to be in 5 to 10 years after they get, a couple of $100,000 off, flipping crypto. We don't know, and what does that mean exactly? Are they libertarian socialists? Are they anarchists? Does that just mean that they don't want regulation? Does that mean that they want to abandon profit? They're not communists.
That's a really good point. And I have that conversation with a lot of my other close comrades who share vaguely similar political affinities. And they often bring up this idea that, right, there are more people joining DSA, that statistics always gets trotted out, that DSA's numbers have increased in the last 5 years or whatever. Or statistically, right, Zoomers are more interested in socialism. Not, who knows what that means when someone surveys them, but they're allegedly interested in it. But what that means beyond, right, a catchphrase is to be anyone to be determined, right? And is it just like, is it Bernie Sanders? Well, maybe. I mean, but whether that's socialism or not, again, that's different discussion. But yeah, there's a lot of there are easy outs to try to be optimistic just for the sake of being optimistic, trotting out numbers, like statistics to make you feel good. But the left needs to be realistic about having a coherent ideology in some way and building political consciousness beyond just DSA's numbers doubling in a year. Okay.
That means organizing actual people, working class people, physically.
Seeing that. Go ahead, Jay.
Oh, I just want to say I have to do this to give credit to my comrade John McCullum, who co-authored one of the Boomer essays and papers with me. He was one of my primary co-authors. I always want to give credit to him. He's out in Minot State University, North Dakota.
Ooh. I know where that is.
He's teaching in Minot. He might be listening right now. I hope he is. He knows that we're talking now. And he actually, some of his research, he investigates, gosh, I hope I don't butcher it now, but he was doing some interviews speaking with the rush for shale, I think like oil fracking out in North Dakota or something like that.
Yep.
And he did some interviews with the boom of the industry out there, asking them about how do you view the industry? Like, why did you come here? What do you getting at some of the ideas of like class consciousness, of like where they see themselves in the class structure, how do they view the industry, what benefits does it bring them. So he's addressing some of these material questions about what we'll call the quote real working class in Middle America. So I want to give a plug for his work and also shout him out because he is my co-author on some of this work we're talking about. He deserves that credit. So shout out to John McCullum if he's listening there, and y'all should check out his work.
Well, there should be links. If not, I'll put some links up to both of your pieces. John, I would love to talk to you about your work in North Dakota, as I did work there during that boom. So I'd love to hear kind of what you've got and maybe add some of my own little why the hell I went out there in the first place. Thank you, Jason, for taking the time to talk with us. You will be joining us in the champagne room, correct?
Yep, champagne. I'm going to pop the bubbly and I'm ready to go.
Well, if you guys are patrons, the link should already be up. If you want to join us for more of this generational discussion, we're going to talk more shit. I'm actually going to be able to curse a lot more because it's going to be behind a paywall. And I won't feel bad when Pascal says that Mama Robert watches the show and doesn't like all the cursing because I'm trying to watch it. This will be a curse show behind the paywall. And Pascal's going to tell us stories about when he used to break dance on cardboard in New York.
Well, can I just say one last thing quick?
Go right ahead. Go ahead, man.
I couldn't avoid looking at the comment section. I just want to say, when I said that John was investigating the, quote, real working class, I meant people working jobs, not the online Twitter left. That's all I was getting at, okay?
I thought you were going to say, what I meant to say was white people.
God.
Because you know who worked in North Dakota? White people. Lots of white people. Tons. Thank you so much, Jason. We have the link. Just exit out here. Go to the other link. We will see you guys shortly. Thank you so much. Wait a minute. Let me pull it up. And speaking of capitalist realism, let's enjoy the cartoons of my youth over music I made for my 3-year-old. We are out.